afternoon, everybody. My name is Armaan Chandnani. I'm 15 years old, and I come here from Seattle, Washington, in the United States. Now, the title of my talk is Power of Early Realization. Today, I'm going to explain just a few items from my bookshelf. Now, this here is a picture of my bookshelf back at my home in Seattle, Washington. As you can see, I've dumped tons of random items on it, from books, trophies, pens, etc. Today, I just want to focus on 4 of these items and how they've shaped how I see the world and what I've done to try to change it. Now, I want to take a moment to just explain a concept that I'm going to talk about throughout my talk, and that's advocacy. Back in the United States, advocacy is incredibly important, and it shapes pretty much everything in terms of government, policy, and change. As someone only 15 years old, advocacy is extremely important to me to solve issues that I care about, and it involves standing up to the issues, speaking, debating, and meeting with people to discuss how we can make a change and make an impact. So I want to start with the item on the left, which is this notebook. Now, this notebook has been with me for a couple of years, and I've used it for drawing, scribbling, doodling, just tons of random stuff. I often see myself using this notebook during class time while a teacher's talking, and a couple of years ago, I was doing just that. It was a Wednesday, and I was in my math class, and I was scribbling in my notebook while a teacher was going on about certain problems. But suddenly, on the school speakers, we were told that we had to get down, get under our desks, stay quiet, and turn off the lights. Obviously, I was incredibly confused, and so I quickly ducked under my desk, holding on to this notebook, shaking in fear. You see, we were just told that in our school, there may be an intruder who has a gun. And so, one moment, I was just scribbling in my notebook, just like always, and the next, I was fearing for my life. I was fearing that someone with a weapon would barge into my classroom and cause harm to me and my friends. Now, a couple of moments of panic later, we were told that there actually was no intruder. There was nobody in our school with a gun, and that we were all safe. What we had just experienced is called a lockdown practice drill. You see, in the United States, we have a system of practice drills in the case of certain emergencies. In the case that there could be an intruder in the building with a gun, we do this lockdown drill, which involves getting under our desks, staying quiet, and turning off the lights. Now, thankfully, this moment with my notebook was just a drill. But what if it wasn't? What if someone was actually in my school with a gun? Because I realized then that there are real cases of that. Gun violence is a major issue in the United States, with 327 incidents per day. That day with my notebook, I realized that there had to be something I could do to fix this, to stand up against gun violence and start fighting for gun restriction. So while I was just 15 years old, I actually started advocating for gun restriction. I started meeting with people, speaking about it, and actually realizing that I could make a real difference. So that day with my notebook is very important to me, and is the beginning of my advocacy journey. It's how I went from just observing problems to actually fighting to fix them. And now I've advocated for many more issues beyond gun violence. Now, the second item from my bookshelf I want to talk about is this pen. Now, this here looks just like any normal blue pen, but there's a lot more to it. You see, this past January, I was standing outside a building called the Washington State Capitol Building. This is the building, and it marks the state capital of Washington State in the United States of America. It's a building where laws are created and politicians who have years of experience meet to create these laws. Now, as I was standing outside this building back in January, I started to think of my parents. My parents immigrated to the United States 25 years ago from India. Now, I myself was born in the United States, so I've lived with both Indian and American culture in my life. Now, growing up in this environment, it taught me the welcoming environment needed so immigrants can thrive and build a community. I knew then that I had to continue pushing for such an environment so more immigrants could come to the United States and thrive. And so that's what started my journey advocating for immigrant support. While I was just 15 years old, I started meeting with people, talking to people, and actually advocating to create real new laws. Now, back to that day in January, I was standing outside this building, and I was about to go in to witness the final step of a lawmaking process. You see, in the months before this moment, there was a new law that was being created to support immigrants. It involved countless meetings, debates, and speaking. But as I walked in this building, I got to see that law get signed into law by the governor of Washington. Now, the moment pictured here isn't just special to me, but also to the many lives that were impacted by this immigration support law. And if you can notice, the pen that the governor used to sign the law is the same pen that's on my shelf back in Seattle today. It's a reminder to me of the power of advocacy, even though I was just 15 years old standing next to the governor. It's a reminder that this isn't just ink and plastic. It's proof that advocacy works, that even when you're young, you can write real change into history. Now, for the third item from my bookshelf, I want to talk about this Marvel comic. Now, the reason this is on my shelf isn't because I'm like a huge Marvel collector. I don't even read a lot of Marvel. But it's actually because this taught me something very simple about advocacy. You see, in this Spider-Man comic book, while Spider-Man walks around the streets of New York, he ends up coming across a guy on a corner with his head down. He has his hands on his face, and he's visibly upset and lonely. Now, I want to remind you guys that Spider-Man has all these incredible superpowers that no one else has. Yet, despite having all that, he simply sits down next to the guy and talks to him. This simple action isn't something that you would see in like an action movie, but it stuck with me. It was such a small, simple action, and yet, by the end of it, the guy who was once lonely and upset was actually cheered up and happy. Spider-Man didn't need all of his powers. He just needed to notice something was wrong and create a simple action. You see, the problem with what people see when they see advocacy is these false assumptions. Because when I talk to people my age about this, I hear the same thing over and over. They'll say, I don't know how to give speeches, or I'm too young to make a law, or anything crazy like that. But the truth is, advocacy is much more simple than that. It simply starts with noticing when something is wrong and wanting to speak up. Even if it's just helping a friend when they're left out or helping a neighbor, all of this can make a positive impact, just like Spider-Man did. You don't need a cape, you don't need a big microphone, you just need to start and notice something is wrong. Heroes are made by the paths they choose, not the powers they are graced with. Now, for my fourth and final item from my bookshelf, I want to talk about this book. Now, my grandfather gave me Catch-22 by Joseph Heller when I turned 14 years old. Some of you may have read it. I remember laughing and saying, I would never read this. It looks old and boring. Now, my grandfather responded that it would make sense when I did read it. So I took the book, dumped it onto my bookshelf, and expected to never touch it ever again. My grandfather passed away last year. And a couple of weeks after that, I picked up the book again, and I started to see what he meant. There's a line in this book that says, there was only one catch, and that's catch-22. But what does that mean? Well, catch-22 is about being trapped in a system where things just don't make sense, where trying to change something feels impossible. And sometimes advocacy can feel the exact same. If you try to change something, they'll say you're too young. If you try to speak up, people just say, wait your turn. You dream big, people call you naive. The truth is, we're stuck in this world where there's so many problems, and sometimes people just deny you and say that you're too young or you can't do anything that's genuine. But what I've learned, and maybe this book helped me see it, is that no matter who you are or how old you are, you can always make a difference. Even though problems may be different in different places and solutions may differ as well, anyone can advocate. So I thought about my grandfather and how he always told me, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Say something. Catch-22 reminds us that even though systems aren't always logical, courage often is. Advocacy can always work. As young people, we inherit the contradictions of the world, but we don't have to accept them. Advocacy is how we break out of these systems, break out of this catch-22, and make sense of a senseless world. So all of these items on my bookshelf back in Seattle have taught me something. The notebook taught me that action is possible. The pen reminds me that change is real. The Marvel comic symbolizes how noticing matters. And my grandfather's copy of Catch-22 tells me that even when the world feels absurd, we still get to decide how we respond to it. That's the power youth have. That's the power we all have. Thank you for seeing what's on my bookshelf.